Now that is the way that you go into the Christmas break. The Minnesota Wild pick up a 3-2 win over the Boston Bruins as Kirill Kaprizov scores again. Joel Eriksson gets an assist from the Bruins, and Marc-Andre Fleury picks up yet another win. Let's break down all the action in tonight's Locked On Wild postcast.
You are Locked On Wild postcast, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into tonight's Locked On Wild postcast as the Minnesota Wild pick up a 3-2 win over the Boston Bruins and actually sweep the Bruins in the season series here this year, winning both games. And for the Wild, they pick up their 15th win of the season. They're now 10-3 under John Hynes. And this was an exciting game, to say the least, because it came down to the wire. The Wild's, courtesy of a pretty dominant second period, were able to come away with a win against a Boston Bruins team despite playing last night. They had plenty of fight in this game, and there's a lot to recap in this one tonight. But let's start with the particulars. The Wild trailed 1-0 after one. The Bruins getting an early power play goal. David Pastrnak again, his third goal against the Wild in these two games. And so the Wild go into the first intermission trailing 1-0. And we talked about it in our pregame show, the importance for the Wild of avoiding getting into a penalty fest with the Boston Bruins in this game. And as Michael Russo noted after the game, the Pat Maroon penalty that led to the Bruins getting a score was the last penalty on the Minnesota Wild in the contest. It was the Boston Bruins that could not stop going to the penalty box in this one tonight. And so the Wild find themselves trailing 1-0, but then in the second period, everything flips. The Wilds get a goal to start it from Joel Eriksson, although I'm going to be completely honest, it was more of an own goal for the Boston Bruins that led to the Wild being able to tie the score. After that goal was scored, the engine completely turned on for the Minnesota Wild. Kirill Kaprizov scores on just a nifty play, cutting right through the middle of the zone, right towards the net on a great feed, and he scores to make it 2-1. That was the score heading into the third period because Linus Ullmark just stood on his head in that second period to prevent the Wild from adding to their lead. In the third period, Marcus Foligno gets a score on a nice play in front of the net, right in front of Ullmark, on a great feed from Pat Maroon. That made it 3-1. Yes, Boston did score to cut it to 3-2, and they hung on to pick up the win and a couple of big points for the Minnesota Wild here in this one. And again, John Hynes 10-3 since he took over, and I think the biggest reason that this Wild team was able to pick up the win in this one is because they kept pushing. They kept pushing offensively. They had a ton of offensive zone time, if not for the fact that Ullmark had some amazing saves in this one. This is probably a 5 or a 6-1 win for the Minnesota Wild. And it comes once again in a game in which Jared Spurgeon, Jonas Brodin, Matt Zuccarello, and Ryan Hartman didn't play, and the Wild still had enough in the tank to be able to come away with the win here in this one. And, you know, credit to those top-line guys again, the Hynes core, as we called them in yesterday's episode. Kaprizov had another solid game here tonight. Joel Eriksson, who we said don't be surprised if he has a big game in this one tonight. He gets a goal. A lot of those top-level guys, Brock Faber and Matt Boldy, they played solid in this one tonight as well, even though they didn't get on the score sheet. Those guys all factored in again in this one as the Wilds were able to come away with the win. But I want to give some credit to the line combination of Johansson, Gaudreau, and Maroon. That line combination I thought played really, really well in this one, especially early in the first period when it was still a little bit of a feeling out between the two teams. That this first period was very, it was very tight. There wasn't a lot in the way of shot opportunities in the first period, and credit to that Goudreau line for being able to um, push the tempo and keep the Wild in the offensive zone to keep Boston out, because that's the other side of the coin here, is that you spend a ton of time in the offensive zone, and that just was less and less time that the Bruins were able to spend on the attack themselves. Marc-Andre Fleury had some really big saves in this one. He only had to face 21 shots. Just 21 shots in this game. He had 19 of 21 in the saves department. And it's the same that we've seen from this team since John Hines took over. And ironically enough, as I sit here up in the press box doing our postcast tonight, looking out on the ice, and Hines and family out there enjoying just the quiet arena here tonight. So getting a chance to take in after yet another win is a fun scene to see out here on the ice. So a fun game for the Minnesota Wild here tonight. But let's go back to Kirill Kaprizov, who now has scored in 3 straight games. He's got 4 goals in that span. And folks, he had a couple of instances tonight again where he is really feeling himself. He had both hands in his bag, as the kids say, on the power play a couple of different times. I know the overall numbers for the power play suggest that it wasn't a particularly, 1 for 5 is okay. I thought the power play looked really good in this one tonight. It just was Ullmark being able to stop everything that came his way. But Kaprizov had just some of those feeds on the power play tonight where you just shake your head and you kind of laugh, because you're like, okay, Kaprizov, you can stop showing off here a little bit. So it looks, that's now, I think, 4 straight games where he just has looked like the guy we expected. And that has been really encouraging for this team. But again, you're relying on those key contributors, and let's give Brock Faber a hand here tonight, who had just a much smaller workload in this one. Just 27 minutes of ice time, not anywhere near his usual 30 that he has been getting over these last few games. But he was solid. I thought Zach Bogosian had a really good game in this one tonight. Had the one instance in which he was to the right side of the net. Marc-Andre Fleury had slid over to the left to make a save, and Bogosian was right there to be able to cut the puck off on the back end. And then him and Fleury were able to exchange some stick taps as they thanks for having my back on that play. And so you get really good play from Middleton, you get good play from Faber, you get good play from Bogosian. Alex Goligoski even having some good moments in this one tonight. And so all around, just a really fun game to take in before everybody gets a few days to just kick back and enjoy for Christmas. And the Minnesota Wild just continuing to take care of business here in the month of December. You may recall that we talked about the December schedule coming right off of Dean Evison being fired and having no idea what to expect for the Minnesota Wild at the beginning of the month. Zach and I having an opportunity to dive into the schedule and try to predict. I said 10 wins for the Wild in December, and they are at 8 with 3 games to go. So that the month of December has been the get right month for the Minnesota Wild, to say the least. Even though they're missing a ton of key players, they still continue to find ways to win games, which is just a huge testament to the battle of this team, a huge testament to the next man up mentality for this team. Marcus Foligno talked about it after the game out on the ice with Kevin Gorg. It's just this team just continues to try to dig out of that early season hole and they are really intent on putting together a huge 2024 to try to get back into the race. So those are kind of my thoughts on what we saw here in this one tonight. We'll take a look at where things stand with the rest of the teams in action tonight, because a few of the teams that the Wild were chasing in the standings were also in action here in this one. And so we'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at plenty more as we continue today's Locked On Wild postcast after this. Today's Locked On Wild postcast is brought to you by Sleeper. The NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities, whether it be Kirill Kaprizov's continued push to get back on his normal pace this year, whether it be Marco Rossi scoring goals, Matt Boldy, or the Minnesota Wild inevitably somewhere down the line hoisting the Stanley Cup. You can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether elite upper echelon players like McDavid, Ovechkin, Crosby, or McKinnon will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, or more in a given game. And if you listened to Friday's show and picked Joel Eriksson and Kirill Kaprizov, you had yourself a pretty good day to close things out here before Christmas. So hopefully you took our advice and were able to enjoy a nice little winnings from Sleeper. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll also get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Today's Locked On Wild postcast also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. The Minnesota Wilds pick up a 3-2 win against the Boston Bruins to finish the pre-Christmas schedule. They're now 15-13-4 on the season and get a chance to just rest up after a pretty strenuous, I think it's 4 games in the last 6 days for the Minnesota Wild. And so a much deserved opportunity to just kind of take a breath before a big push to move us into 2024. So let's take a look at what has gone on throughout the NHL so far here tonight, because it turns out the Minnesota Wild are getting a little bit of help from some other teams as the schedule goes. So the teams that the Wild are most directly chasing right now, the Nashville Predators and the Arizona Coyotes, have either lost or are losing. The Nashville Predators got upended by the Dallas Stars because Dallas scored 2 goals in the final 13 seconds of that game. And so they won in regulation over the Nashville Predators, which is very important because no point for the Nashville Predators in that game, which is massive. So for one day, Dallas Stars fans, that's probably the only time you'll ever hear me say that is thank you, Dallas, for a little bit of help in beating Nashville. And the Arizona Coyotes currently playing the Colorado Avalanche and having a miserable time doing it as they trail the Avalanche by a score of 4-0. 3 second period goals for the Avalanche to pull away in that one. Now, the only team that was able to get in front of the Wilds and win was the St. Louis Blues, who beat the Chicago Blackhawks 7-5 tonight. Connor Bedard had a Michigan goal against Jordan Binnington, but the Blues were able to pick up a win there. And so St. Louis able to at least keep themselves a point ahead of the Minnesota Wild at this point. And so now the Wild's only 2 points behind Arizona and 4 points behind Nashville. But the Wild have 2 games in hand on the Predators. And so they continue to get some points back here as the schedule continues. So big night for the Dallas Stars and the Colorado Avalanche. We'll take it as the Wild try to get back in. Let's take a look at the comments here tonight, and we'll get you involved in the show here. This will be the last one we have until Wednesday. From a postcast perspective, we'll still have a couple of episodes for you on Monday and Tuesday, so fear not there. But let's get you to the comments here, and we'll start with Quadrum channeling John Wick. People keep asking Kirill Kaprizov if he's back. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back. And I think so too, because you're just starting to see some of the swagger plays that Kaprizov makes, the stick dangles between multiple defenders and skating around people. But I think the thing that has been really impressive to see with Kirill Kaprizov over these last few games is that he is skating to the puck and beating people to the puck in the corners. Something that he had not been doing as much of earlier in the year. He's starting to really, he had a couple of instances tonight where he was able to beat the Bruins to the puck and keep things alive. But, it starts and ends with goals for Kaprizov. And so if he's able to score, if he's able to get on the score sheet, that helps this team out tremendously. And so I think we are starting to really see the Kaprizov we were hoping we'd see at the beginning of the season now is finally getting there here at this point in the season. Mike joining us. 10-3 gets it done, but they must continue this dominance. And that's exactly it, because you look at the schedule for the Minnesota Wilds coming up. To finish out the month of December, they play the Detroit Red Wings. The game that got Dean Evason fired was that 4-1 loss against Detroit. And then it is probably the 2 biggest games of the season so far, as the Wild have the home and home against Winnipeg to close out the month or the year of 2023. If the Wild can beat Detroit and can split against Winnipeg, maybe even get 3 out of 4 points in those 2 games, that goes a long way for the confidence heading into 2024. And if you aren't able to win either of those games against the Jets, that's where things start to kind of get frustrating, because you've made up all this ground, you've been playing so well, and then all of a sudden you go up against a team that is legitimately in the thick of things and is at present second in the Central Division with 43 points and fourth in the Western Conference in points. If you can't at least split with Winnipeg, that kind of knocks you down a little bit of a that knocks you down a little bit after all this winning that they've been doing. So just keep pushing offensively, and keep those wins coming for the Wild, and they'll be just fine. Quadrum also goes to show you both of us are missing players. We were on a back-to-back in their home and won, and they lost on our ice on the second of a back-to-back. Yeah, it's the fact that this team continues to win without Brodin and Spurgeon for one, but then also without Zuccarello and Ryan Hartman not playing in this game tonight. It's huge for this team to be able to continue to pick up these wins and continue to pull back in to the into this push to try to get back into the fight. And so it was a great performance here tonight for the what's up, Jesse Pierce, for the Minnesota Wild tonight. Let's talk a little Brock Faber, because Faber was everywhere again in this one tonight, stepping up on the power play. Didn't end up getting 30 minutes tonight, which I think we're okay with. 27-47 was all in this one, as Tracy notes, just 27-47 of ice time tonight. But I thought Faber did a really, really good job defensively, helping pressure the Bruins and limit the space that they were able to get. The Bruins had really little and limited space to work with anytime they had the puck. And so the Wild defense did a great job, complemented with the offense, of being able to just keep Boston on their heels and keep them in their defensive end, to limit the amount of pressure that Fleury had to put up with here in this one tonight. As Jesse tweeted out, Fleury kind of getting a little bored there at points because he just wasn't facing hardly any shots, especially in that second period. And so Faber's the one leading the charge in that aspect. And he continues to just do more and more and more. And honestly, we've talked about it previously, but you look at that trade, Kevin Fiala for Brock Faber and a first-round pick. Brock Faber by himself is just a really good return, and he's turning into just this monster NHL defenseman that is becoming, as Hoptic says, near untouchable for this team. And he's in his first full season in the NHL. So it's not like there isn't more that he can continue to do. And as he continues to do it, he could end up being, upper echelon type player as he continues to add, especially in the offensive end. And I think it was Judd Zulgad in Judd's Hockey Show talking about just how good of a job Faber does walking the blue line. And that came into play here a couple of times tonight, being able to go get a puck to keep it in the zone, to keep the Wild on the attack. Those are just those types of instinctual things that he's able to do that a lot of other skaters just struggle with. And it's just so much fun to watch him do his thing. And we're just scratching the surface with what Faber is able to bring to the table. Mike, I think Hines is really embracing the opportunity. And I saw a couple of other comments in regards to Hines here as well. It just seems like he has been able to, in just subtly tweaking. We talked about this in Friday's show. It's not like he's made major sweeping changes, but he hasn't really had to, because he has turned the focus from being this slow kind of like this bowling ball type team to a team that's playing the style of hockey that everybody else is playing in the NHL. Quick with your feet and quick with your decision making too. And I think the fact that he was able to go to that is one of the biggest differences for this team, because it always felt early in the season, especially, like the Wilds were operating every game as if they had to really slow the pace down and had to play at a particular style and a particular tempo in order to win. And now you look at what this team needs to do to come away with wins. It's like they need to just push offensively. It's not as though they have to like grab the other team and pull them down to their tempo. They just got to be quick, and they just have to continue to push the pressure offensively. And so I think his changing of that mentality has been huge for this team. But he said it in his first game. The players make it pretty easy to coach if they just go out and do the things that you put them in positions to do. And this team has continued to be able to do that over these last 13 games, and that's why they're 10-3 since Hines took over. Bob joining us here tonight. Foligno with the high hurdle for the tap-in. Sounded like a basketball bucket. He really did slam dunk that thing right in front of Ullmark. And that ended up being a really big goal for this team because obviously the Bruins scored to make it 3-2. But, Foligno has been a guy who has not, from a points perspective, been one of the regular contributors in throughout this season, but he has he has started to really play a role, especially with some of the push that this team has been able to do here recently. Now let's talk a little Marc-Andre Fleury. Getting caught up in the comments section, and as Mike notes, how close is Flower now to second all time? One win behind. And so if Fleury wins his next start, he will be tied with Patrick Roy for second all-time amongst goalies with wins. Two more, and he passes Patrick Roy for second all-time. And it has been a lot of fun, not just this year, but in previous seasons as well, to just watch Marc-Andre Fleury do his thing. He had the snappy glove save right off the bat, off of a Boston Bruins breakaway. And it takes maybe one or two of those in order for him to get going. And he has the flash, he has the sizzle as a goalie, and it leads to just fun games, it seems like, every time he's out there, because there's going to be chaos, there's going to be there are going to be some goals, but you look at what Fleury has been able to do recently, and his numbers now continuing to trend in a positive direction. In the month of December, he's 2-1, for instance, with a 2.66 goals against average and a 929 save percentage. He's been above 90% in every game that he's played here in the month of December. And so Fleury trending in the right direction. Philip Gustafsson has gotten himself back on track. And so as for when Fleury will get an opportunity to break the all-time wins record and when he'll be able to tie it, it's hard to say. We know for sure that he will get one of the Winnipeg games. That we can definitely say. And honestly, maybe the home and home against Dallas, maybe you split and you go with each goalie in those games. So if, let's say, he wins his next two starts, then you could be in a situation where if he starts somewhere in between, the games you have in between Winnipeg and Dallas are home against the Calgary Flames on January 2nd, home against the Tampa Bay Lightning on January 4th, at Columbus on Saturday, January 6th, and then back home against the Dallas Stars on Monday, January 8th. So let's say, and who knows, John Hines has been very, very apt to just ride the hot hand here at points. Maybe he goes right back to Fleury against the Detroit Red Wings, because Fleury looked good in this one. I think the biggest key was that he wasn't tested hardly at all, but he still made some big saves to keep the Wilds in it, especially when it was 1-0, and kept it at 3-2, especially late as the Bruins are trying to mount a comeback. It could be that he starts against the Red Wings, and if he wins that one, then he's tied, and he needs one win in order to cross that Patrick Roy threshold. We'll have to wait and see how things play out in terms of the starts, but the goalies have been playing very well over the last couple of weeks, which is why this team has continued to win games. And so it all leads to the Minnesota Wilds picking up a 3-2 win over the Detroit Red Wings, or the Boston Bruins here tonight. They'll play Detroit on Wednesday, right back here at Xcel Energy Center. We'll have the game for you. But I think with the fact that it is the 23rd of December, I think the fact that Christmas is right around the corner, I'm going to call it here for tonight's Locked On Wild postcast so that I can get to enjoying my little Christmas break here. And we'll have content for you coming up on Monday. Alex and I pre-recorded an episode that'll drop for you Monday. And we'll have some content for you coming up on Tuesday as well. Wednesday, we'll be back into the regular role with you as the week rolls on. But Merry Christmas to everybody that tunes in to all of these Locked On Wild postcasts. We thank the listeners tremendously for making these postcasts as fun as they are. Everybody that tunes in on a nightly basis to take in wins, react to losses, whatever it may be. We thank you for making Locked On Wild part of your daily routine and hope you have a great Christmas with family or however you are celebrating it over the weekend. Make sure if you haven't already that you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes or any new content throughout the week. And make sure to vote for Locked On Wild for the Sports Podcast Awards. One of the finalists, as we've mentioned, for the top hockey podcast for the Sports Podcast Awards. So make sure to vote if you have not already. You can find the link to vote in our social media bios. So with that, everybody have a great Christmas, and we'll catch up with you again on Monday here on Locked On Wild.